Well, welcome everyone today, and to those who are viewing online, welcome. And we're delighted to have our speaker today, Mike Freeman. Mike is the founder, I believe, right, of Innosphere Ventures?
Not quite.
Not quite.
Okay. Been a while.
Been a while. And they're a partner organization for the University of New Mexico and UNM Rainforest Innovations. And they really are involved in all things entrepreneurial, accelerating companies and technologies to be ready for investment. They're an investor and manages some life science labs as well. So thank you for being here. This is going to be a really interesting topic because nobody really thinks about failure. But it's an important learning lesson and sometimes can be the best thing that happens to an entrepreneur. So welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Lisa. So hi, everybody. My name is Mike Freeman. So as Lisa mentioned, I run an organization called Innosphere Ventures. And the kind of genesis for this talk is actually a book I'm going to mention in a minute. And we had a chance to have the author, Tom Iceman, do a couple of sessions for companies, and decided that a lot of what he's talking about, a lot of founders are dealing with, and kind of adapted some of the work he's done and a lot of research he's done into a bit of a shorter presentation that focuses mainly on the risk factors early on. So if you pick this book called Why Startups Fail, you'll also read about when companies make it through the startup stage, some of the things that they get tripped up on. And that's going to be, generally speaking, after the investors come in and a little bit down the line. So I won't focus on those today because it's really around the early kind of problems, issues that companies have. So just kind of jump in. If you were guessing why startup companies fail, just throw out a couple of reasons why you think that generally they don't make it. Just throw in, or on chat if anybody wants to. What do you think the reasons are companies might fail? You got to just guess. Money, okay, yep. Team.
There's no market.
Market. Technology doesn't work. Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, technology doesn't work. Yeah, but can't do much about that one. Yeah.
Someone said they don't test the market.
Exactly. Okay, so you hit all the core factors, really, actually, just now. So if you are doing a startup or are in a startup, highly recommend you look this report up from CB Insights. And by the way, the slides will be available. They study every other year. They take about 200 companies that failed, and they study deeply each of those companies and then try to categorize the core reasons why the company didn't make it. Now, you obviously can have multiple reasons of failure, right? But so they try to quantify what's kind of number 1, 2, 3, 4. If you look at this data over time, it's interesting. Running out of money or failing to raise money has never been a number 1 reason until 2021. Not that it's hugely different than no market need. No market need had driven for many, many years the number 1 reason why companies went out of business. So these are the 4 big ones. Money, market, outcompeted just means they don't understand who's already out there. And in a lot of cases, the choice for a customer is doing nothing. A lot of companies don't really dive into that question. Why would someone do anything differently at all? And then a flawed business model. And that just means the company didn't make money. So they got out, they started selling the product, but they couldn't be profitable, couldn't make it. So here's the kind of hard reality for founders working in harder tech. You have all these business risks, but you also have a ton of product risk on top of that. And so, product risk is in and of itself, does the technology work? Can I get a regulatory approval? Can I maintain valuable IP over time? There's all kinds of other issues that go with product. I'm not going to get into all those today. Any of those surprise anybody? Pretty much what you thought. Okay. So highly recommend you read this book if you're going to do a startup or you're in one. Tom Iceman is faculty at Harvard Business School. And it's interesting when you pick this book up, why he decided to write this book. He's an angel investor. and he's been investing in companies for many, many years. And he thought, boy, I'm very smart. I'm at Harvard Business School. I teach entrepreneurship. I'm an angel investor. Why do I keep picking companies badly that are failing? And so it was a pretty interesting reason he did this research. And that's what drove him to work on this, and did lots and lots of very effective research on the topic. It's a pretty practically minded book, which I like personally, and kind of gets right into the core risk factors. So let's talk about the big ones for younger companies. So this is all from Tom's work. So the first failure mode is called good idea, bad bedfellows. It just means that for any number of reasons, the people that were in the startup or coming into the startup don't work. And that leads to a risk factor. And there's a couple of things in particular startups that are more important than others in this risk factor. First is complex operations. So I was just chatting with a faculty founder just about 30 minutes ago. We got into complex operations. How you manufacture this, label it, package it, ship it, store it, deliver it. That's complex operations. When you're a technologist, it might understand the biology, the chemistry, the mechanical engineering aspects of the product, but may not fully understand that, and you have to build that into the company. The other reasons why you see companies failing is particularly in harder asset companies, where you have a physical inventory and the lack of understanding about how to create products, store them, how to create profit off of those products. And then lastly, companies need to raise a ton of money. So think about biopharma companies, a ton of risk in those businesses on top of regulatory. But the amount of money, it's estimated right now in the US, it's $1 billion to bring a new drug to market. That's 2021 data. So think about if you're doing a company in the pharma space, that is a very, very tough road to go down, and it's a lot of money. So the idea is avoid this failure mode around partnering and who you're pulling into the company. The second is called false starts, and this one you have a lot of resources at Rainforest Innovation to help you with, and it really has to do with upfront customer research. Really rigorous testing around MVP is called minimal viable product, MVP for that term. And it's interesting when companies are surveying why they fail. Many of them will acknowledge after they failed, I didn't fundamentally understand the customer. You would not hear a company pitch an investor early on and say that, but that is reality, is they didn't have a complete understanding. Good news is all three of the core risk factors I'm going to run through are definitely avoidable if you're aware of them and you're conscious and deliberately kind of take these on. The next one is called false positives, and you may be familiar with a book called Crossing the Chasm. This has to do with early adopters of a product or a technology are not your mainstream buyers, and I'll show you in a little bit what that means. And so the company gets really good signals. Hey, I'm selling, I'm getting early interest, and then you just stall. You cannot access the main market or the biggest part of the market. So that's called false positives. Any questions on those before we go on? So all that kind of makes sense to everybody? So here's the really helpful thing that Tom did, is not only talks about what these risk factors are, but how do you address them, how do you work through them. So he came up with this, what he called diamond and square. And the idea is there are different factors that contribute to a successful company. And there's the kind of external resources, who you pull in as a founder, for example, who your investors are, who you partner with to take a product to market or build or manufacture a product, and then the team itself below the founders. And that's one set of factors you need to consider. And then in the middle, there's a whole series of things around the customer value proposition, the actual technology and how to execute on the product itself, how you market, and then can you make money. So the ideas with diamond and square models, if you tackle each of these and are aware of them, this will greatly reduce the risk factors in your company. So let's kind of run through these. So the inside the diamond are called the opportunity, or the startup's opportunity. Again, that's customer value prop, technology operations, marketing, profit formula. And then on the outside are the resources that you bring in. So it is helpful in my mind as I think about startups. When I'm talking to people, you tend to separate these things out from an investor perspective. For example, you want to know who the founders are. You have good diversity in the team. I mean, not just literal diversity, but do people know things differently from one another? Is it largely technical founders? If you are an investor, it matters a lot who your other investors are. As you're putting money into a company, you want to work with other investors. And as a startup, you want to work with good quality investors. The team, oftentimes in younger companies, is not going to be super obvious how the team's going to get built out. And a lot of technical founders stumble on hiring. They've never hired at scale, meaning when a company's funded, yes, start adding a lot of positions. They really haven't done that in their career. They've mainly been working on the product or the science. And then partners, lots of companies get tripped up choosing the wrong partners, either in distribution agreements or called channel agreements, or even product development. And so if you think about diligence, those are items when investors working with you, they want to know about. Now, what they're going to zero in on probably first and foremost is customer value proposition. Do you have something that you fully researched and you have a high confidence level and there's good data to suggest that customers want whatever it is you're building? And so it really starts there. In a first pitch to investors, that's going to be the number one thing. Can you very thoroughly cover the customer value proposition? Okay. So let's kind of just run through these at a high level. And I'll stop in about 10 minutes or so and open it up for Q&A because I think it's something more fun to have a conversation about these things. So the value proposition, I think everybody generally understands what this is, but it's really hard to nail the value proposition in the real world. So let's talk about what that is. So when I'm looking at a company and it's not clear there's a really strong differentiated approach to what they're doing, I'm probably not going to be real interested in that. Okay, differentiation is really key. I see lots and lots of pitches from companies. It's just not very obvious in the pitch or the presentation why what this company is doing is different than what's already available in the market, or if it's novel. Sometimes it's really hard to explain truly novel technologies as well. In companies with harder IP, so think about life sciences, energy, some software, but it's a little hard to have a lot of hard IP and software. What you're also looking for from the investor perspective and the company perspective is sustained differentiation. So we like companies, for example, that have the ability to create a suite of patents, for example, around the product where that's possible. Some usually in a university environment and then some outside of the company. That's the most obvious one. The trade secret certainly is important, and there's other ways to create IP in the business. But the question is, can you sustain it? And is it differentiated over a period of time, not just now? So that's a hard question. On the technology and operations, so just using this example from an hour ago, this is, I think, where this company has some challenges. They need to execute against a complete product for a customer. And so the process of not only creating the product, the manufacturing, the distribution, the sales and marketing, that's where the big challenges in my mind are with this business. And so, poor execution around a product company will certainly cause you to fail. We just didn't do what we needed to do to get the product to the customer in a timely fashion. We didn't support it properly, any number of things. Marketing. Most technical founders are pretty averse to marketing. It is critically important for young companies to create awareness in the market. There's a whole, tons of content about how you go out and do this. In many pitches and business plans I see for companies, very underwhelming in terms of what they're thinking about marketing. The reality is you have to get out there in your marketplace and create identity for a product. And this is an area where lot of technical founders really stumble because that's not their background. And I'll say a lot of scientists and engineers, frankly, are not, they're not prone to promote themselves. And it's awkward for them to even really think about doing it from the company's perspective. So the other thing in marketing, depending on what you're doing and who you're selling to, in many financial plans that we see on the investment side, there's not nearly enough spend for marketing and sales. And that's pretty characteristic on a technology based company. You see a lot of R&D, a lot of products, because mainly the founders get that part. And then you go, okay, who's actually going to go market and sell this product? That is going to be a big part of your spend in the early days. And so this is, again, one you can avoid by getting outside help, thinking about your marketing plan. And the last one. So this idea of profit formula, this can be very tough for hard product companies, but understanding all the costs involved in producing your product and then making sure that you can price it appropriately while we can make money down the road. And so it's kind of seemingly a simple question, but when you really get into the financial nuts and bolts of a model for a company, it's quite surprising the things you find out and you learn sort of that aren't there, weren't considered, way under budget, overstated, understated. This is a tough one, but software is pretty easy. Generally speaking, you can create software, maintain it, sell it. If you're a SaaS model, great. That's just sort of rules of thumb. How much profitability you ought to have on different types of products. That does not apply to medical devices and chemicals, hardware. There's definitely targets for sure you shoot at, but this can be really tough for companies in the early days where it's very expensive to make small amounts of the product, and you're assuming you're going to get to scale over time. A lot of companies just cannot cross that gap. And so that's that idea of profit formula. Okay, any questions in the chat or in the room here just before I move on to the resources?
So if you're a startup and you're struggling, when is the time you decide to pivot if you're able to do that? Because you've already invested time and resources into making a product line. When is really like opportune time to pivot, if that makes sense to you? So.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's an opportune time because it's mainly by necessity. You see companies that face any number of these problems, and technical risk. It's pretty much when you know about it, you've got to pivot. I think the most typical one that I would see is a company that believes they have a target market. They start selling, and it's something very different than what they thought it was going to be, and they have to pivot to something else. Price, different delivery, working through a channel, it could be a whole variety of things. There's really no specific point that I see that causes you to pivot. It's the awareness that it's not working. And then you hope you're working with resilient founders that off, except for things like what are called care credit. And that's very, very high interest rates, credit cards basically. So these guys saw an opportunity to work with health systems and regional banks, not like Chase, but to create simple loan products for medical purposes that are low interest. So guess what happened in COVID? All elective surgeries went out the window for about more than 12 months. So so these guys, the classic pivot, they said, okay, what we're doing right now is not working. So they went back to their roots, which is in banking software, and created some new products for PPP forgiveness loans, and then what they call eVault and eNotary. So they said, okay, what can we do right now to create revenue for the company and move forward and not fail? So that's that pivot. It's like this product we developed around patient lending, not going to work for a period of time. who would have known it's close to 18 months, right? So if they had not been adept, they would have been out of business. So that's a good example of a recent pivot we've seen with the company.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. So this is the Celia. I think I'm stuck here. Can you advance for me?
I'm having technical difficulties right now. Sorry, I don't know what happened, but I'm gonna put it on my screen real quick. Sorry. Okay. It's sharing my screen. It like exited out of the Zoom meeting on our computer.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's still recording you, but
Okay.
and I was trying to, I'm sorry, it's not working. Oh, there we go.
Can you just scroll through from there?
Yeah, hold on. Sorry. Okay, there we
Oh, I've
go.
got it now. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so the resource elements are a little bit more straightforward. I think most people have, kind of heard advice in this arena. So founders, the thing that's really tough for investors is kind of two extremes, and we see them quite often. The one extreme is we have a lot of technical founders, 2, 3 in a company. Nobody has any business experience. And then you see the exact opposite. It's like, hey, we're going to take a medical technology to market, no technical expertise. You've got to find a way to bridge that, where you have a balanced founding team. You're not going to have everything covered for sure, but avoid those two pitfalls, because that's going to be really, really difficult to raise money under either of those circumstances. So the other thing is when you're hiring the balance of the team, it's often quite confusing for companies that are starting to raise money and start to move to figure out what to hire internally or not. So kind of the classic example in most startups, I would argue, you should outsource 100% of your finance. You should have nobody internally doing anything related to your finance, except the CEO owns the books, of course. But there's lots of great firms to do your bookkeeping and basic controller work, build your models, produce your financial reports. That's a great example. Do not do that early on when you're building the company. Same thing on the HR side. There are things called professional employment organizations or PEOs. If you're not using a PEO, an investor is going to really wonder what the heck you're doing, trying to build internal HR capability. Your investors, when you get to this point, will very much have ideas and opinions on where to spend money, what parts of the team to grow, how fast, and over what time period. So work closely with your investors, help you get this sorted out. But it's critical to be able to attract the right kind of people to the company, and then don't grow the workforce too fast or the staffing too fast. So the investors, unfortunately, a lot of companies I see don't have a lot of choice about who they're going to take money from. And why is that? So if you look across the mountain and Midwest states, for example, the vast majority of capital that flows into startup companies is later stage. And so when you're early on, you're raising capital. And then if you're not software or SaaS, it's a very limited number of people you can go raise money from. And that's just unfortunate reality. That being said, it is really imperative that you spend time with your investors to make sure they're aligned with what you're trying to do. Now, you don't always have that choice at the end of the day. You may only have a couple of folks that are really interested or can fund you in the early stages. But stay away from firms that obviously aren't aligned or are predatory in any way, shape, or form. You should be able to figure that out pretty quickly. Just like an investor is going to do a background check on all the founders, do reference checks, you absolutely do the same thing on your investors. So strategic partners, I think this is a little bit like investors to me. So if you're bringing a company or a technology to market and you need a larger company to help you do that, which is many, many companies, how do you pick them? How do they pick you? And how do you work together? So it's kind of seemingly a simple question, but let me give you an example of a company we invested in that does real-time analytics inside wastewater pipelines. So think about that for a minute. Not a place you want to go, but so if you look at electric, water utilities, most of these have digitized. And so if you look at a modern water plant or wastewater plant, it has a tremendous amount of technology inside those facilities. Guess what? They have no visibility actually into the collection system as it's known. So these folks develop extremely robust technology to do real-time sensing of water temperature, different chemical constituencies, pH, whole variety of things you need to know if you're treating that water way in advance of it coming to the plant. So who did they want to partner with? Well, they want to partner with big water instrumentation companies. So we happen to know a couple of those folks and connected them up. It took 12 months to get basically a resale agreement done. Now, in a startup to life, that was 25% of how long they've been around, 4 years, a year. And so, not saying that's a bad partnership, but most small companies are not prepared to deal with large companies with lots of attorneys, lots of finance staff, working on their own clock, not yours. And so because of those dynamics, we see a lot of companies enter into pretty poor arrangements because they're just outgunned, out-resourced by a larger company. They're not there, they're extorting them in any way. I don't mean to imply that, but it's just the deal isn't good. And so this is really hard because you need big companies oftentimes for you to be successful, but you're not in the driver's seat on these arrangements at all. And so you've got to understand that and kind of go into that process with your eyes open. So let's kind of talk about a few ideas how to avoid these three big early stage problem areas. So these are probably pretty obvious. If you're thinking about this idea of how do you get the right team, to have a good idea about put the right team together. One strategy I particularly like that I think startups don't deploy as well as they could. There's lots and lots of people out there looking to pro bono advise startup companies. People sold the company, maybe they have had a great corporate career, they're looking to give back. The pitches I see when the founders flash up and they kind of talk about their background, and then you're thinking in the back of your mind, gosh, where's the expertise in X, Y, and Z in this company? And then the next slide is, oh, we brought 3 advisors in because we know we don't know these things. They're not employees, but they're attached to us for now. They're committed to working on a company. Maybe they got some equity, who knows? That's a great way to avoid some team risk. And in the absence of that, you wonder from the investor perspective, sort of why they didn't do that, particularly medical related companies. If the startup doesn't have the equivalent of what would be called a scientific advisory board or committee, that's a showstopper for most investors, because you can't go out and talk to some physicians that have some clout in the industry or local to you to come in and help advise. That's not a good sign. So that's an easy one to fix. Some other things, not knocking like the startup weekend ideas, but if I see a company came together over a weekend and the founders don't know each other, you're thinking, wow, you're about to take a 5, 7, 10-year journey together and you really don't know each other very well. Boy, that's a problem. That's probably not a bet I would want to make as an investor to see how that relationship evolves over time. So kind of carefully, select your co-founders, and usually 2 or 3 is the right number depending on what you're doing. I see some companies that have co-CEOs, really bad idea. That's just going to result in a lot of fighting down the road. Another phenomenon, definitely seen more recently, is spousal teams. Wow, that's tough. There's separation of church and state, so to speak. So kind of be careful of those things. It's unheard of to get those companies funded, but usually most investors are not going to be real excited about that. It's just too much risk to literally your family. If this thing doesn't work out, the stress of that can be really tough. And then lastly, that alignment with the investors and corporate partners. Those are some ideas there. So on the false start side, this is Steve Blank's work. I think a lot of people have seen this double diamond design, but the idea is that you're doing proper discovery, with customers and your product. It's really just that simple. So after I see a pitch from a company I like, probably the first question I'm going to respond back to them is, show me whatever you have, that the work you've done around customer discovery and your early product work. Why do you think what you're doing now is correct from the market's perspective? Many companies cannot produce this. Many companies can't produce it. We were talking a little bit earlier about iCore. That's a great start, but you're not done, unfortunately. You've really only done some of this really early stuff up on the front end. And so one of the things I try to help university startups in particular with is make sure you see the whole process of customer discovery to early product, the complete story, not just the upfront interviewing. Because it feels like after you've done 50, 75, 100 interviews, kind of, oh, well, I know this, I've got it. Not necessarily. There's a lot more that still needs to be done. We would stop diligence in a company that has not done this work properly. It's so important to do that work. This is, again, where you get a ton of help from Rainforest Innovations too. And then the kind of last one, the false positives. Here, let me go to the slide. So here's the thing that happens when you're selling early in many technology companies, is you're really catching those early adopters, which is a small part of the market. This is that crossing the chasm phenomenon. And I know so many companies that come to us on the incubator side of our work and say, hey, we're at $1 million in sales. We got there pretty quick and we're not growing at all right now. Zero growth, or very minimal growth. And what's happening in almost all cases is they've hit this chasm. So the product is not resonating for whatever reason with the larger part of the market. And there's a lot of strategies for how to deal with this. But the main thing is, I think it's, for founders, it's so incredible to get revenue and to get affirmation from customers. And I think in a lot of cases, founders sort of stop really grinding away on who is the customer, how do I keep moving through this trajectory? Did I hit my mainstream customer or not? And lots of companies fail right there. They literally can't get over the hump. It becomes too difficult to run, a couple $1 million business, or it's a proverbial lifestyle company, which is, from the investor perspective, that's a negative. It means you're not going to exit. You might be generating revenue. Maybe it's a decent small business, but it's not scaling and it's not meeting the objectives of the founders and investors. And therefore, it did fail. So you hear that pretty regularly. So a lot of ideas about how do you avoid that. You really start making sure that when you're talking with your early customers, you're not a technology enthusiast, or hey, I'll just kind of try anything because I love technology, and even if it's not very complete or you guys don't do a really good job of supporting it, that's probably not your mainstream customer. Sometimes companies will introduce products very specifically for that early customer with the idea they're going to come right back with a more complete version and sell to the mainstream. It's almost two product strategies. So a couple of different ways around that, but those are the big three reasons why companies fail. The Diamond Square methodology, I think, is really good for teams to pull that out and work through those kind of questions around those topics. And hopefully those, working on those earlier helps you be successful in your company. So let's see, maybe any questions on chat.
There's no questions right now, but there was one comment that said, when starting a company, start with what value do you have to cure customer pain points and find out where your market is, then get into the development of the startup.
Yeah.
And I told people to put their questions in chat, so they might be typing.
Okay, yeah. So what about any other questions here in the room? Was that helpful just to think at a high level about these failure modes? Yeah, I think, when I saw this book about a year or so ago, what I kind of realized in myself, I didn't have the words for this, but when I was, hearing pitches from companies, a lot of this is rattling around the back of my mind. It's not that you're trying to find, a mistake that a company made. That's not it at all. But, I'd say every week, we probably get 30 to 50 pitch decks. And so you have to, from the investor perspective, you got to be able to rule things out pretty quickly. And so these tend to be the things that, you just rule a company out and say, hey, when you have a more complete team, email me back. I can't spend a lot of time, on this because I don't believe that, the technical team has business expertise, vice versa. Or you entered into an arrangement with a corporate strategic that's really bad for your company. That's gonna be hard to overcome. You gave them some exclusivity, you gave some sort of insight into what you're doing that makes your company look like you're tied at the hip to this large business. That's bad from an investor perspective. If I see investors, which I don't want to generally see very often, that maybe aren't held in very high regard in a market, that's, someone's already invested and, it's like, I don't think we get along from an investor perspective. That's probably going to be a pass. So that's what's really happening behind the scenes is the investors are looking for every opportunity to just winnow down the list of deals they're looking at into the ones that make sense. And the more that you can attack these failure modes up front and address them specifically, you're going to do far better in that process of raising money.
Still no, nothing in the chat.
Okay. Again, these slides will be available you can email them out to the attendees.
There's
Yep.
one. Your comments on advisors is well taken. We have tried the SBIR route, but didn't list key clinical and business advisors and were denied.
Yeah, same thing on grants for sure. Yeah. What about any other? Oh yeah, sorry.
That's right. If you're just right now, I'm the sole founder of pretty early stage.
Yep.
Do I have to get a second person as a founder, or is an advisor enough?
Are you planning on adding a founder down the road?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure right now because it's more of a big industrial technology for oil industry pipelines, corrosion. So it kind of straddles the climate change issue and the oil field issue, and it's sort of, I'm the one developing it right now. I don't have any money to pay anybody. So like if it works, then I'll hire somebody to do some data processing, and right now it'll be contract. So it's sort of like, do I need to get a founder later on, or is an advisor who's on the business side, the industry side?
So there's no right way to answer this question, and let me tell you from what I personally have done, because that's the only thing I can really speak to. We've invested in 4 medical device related companies. They're not all technically medical devices, don't worry about it. And all 4 of them are university licensed technology. And in two of the cases, there's a single founder. But we're absolutely expecting an equivalent co-founder to come into business later. Now, why is it okay from our viewpoint to have one founder today? We are investing in the product development. And so right now, for example, that's all that matters in these 2 companies: hitting technical milestones, getting FDA applications completed in both cases. Perfectly happy having a single technical founder run with that. But we would absolutely be expecting a business-oriented co-founder from the bioscience industry to join those companies and probably take a pretty large amount of equity to do that.
Okay.
So the answer is it can be yes. I think in a lot of cases, I think we're probably a little bit more flexible investor than others. For many investors I'm aware of, they would not invest in a company with a single founder. There's too much riding on you specifically, after an investment's made.
Okay.
The other thing is that there's definitely a lot of data that says, people make better decisions in groups. Just, you need support. It's hard to do what you're doing. And there's just kind of a reality. You need that relief valve. So it's not the best way to answer the question, but I think if you can make a compelling case why, the structure is what it is, I think you can get investors to buy off on that. But just don't be surprised if you get a negative reaction from some investors.
Okay.
Because they're just going to be a kind of a hard no on, if I don't have a good diverse founding team, I'm stopping. Yeah, what's yours more? definitive answers on these things, or because there just aren't.
There's another question in the chat. We are developing a medical product and will definitely need a strategic partner. Any advice on how to create meeting opportunities and how to negotiate with these large companies?
Ooh, that's a whole nother hour presentation on corporate partnering. No, seriously, I'll try to give you the high level here. The first thing that I'd say most smaller companies don't do is they don't treat a corporate partnering like a recruitment of a key employee, meaning they look far and wide. So in life sciences, biosciences, maybe there tend to be less than 10 important companies in some spaces, right? In orthopedics, there's 5 or 6 that matter, right? So that number is not going to be huge. But so the first thing is really spend the time to connect with these groups. And it's hard, by the way, because they're big companies. By definition, they're hard to access. And really evaluate each individual potential partner completely separately. You can get enamored with going after a corporate partner just because of their brand. For example, a number of the companies who work with Danaher companies under their umbrella. It's a very good firm to work with. They're very ethical, all these other reasons. They're still a big company, and all the sub companies within Danaher they're still big companies. So look for that reputational brand. Find other small companies that partner with these large guys and see how that's going. And then the main thing is you've got to have proper legal representation. The contracts and agreements are going to blow your mind. And you probably, as a young company, will not understand the nuances of all the language around disclosure. For example, an attorney we work with reviewed about 1,000 corporate NDAs, and has kind of a talk about this. There is all kinds of stuff just in the NDA you're going to get from a large company you probably don't understand. If you're not getting counsel. And then the agreements themselves are very complex. Now there's some JV agreements, joint venture, they're a little bit simpler. But if you're partnering from a sales perspective, a channel perspective, very, very complicated. You've got to have people on your side. So I'd say legal, one, so someone does corporate contracts. And then 2, I'd find an advisor. You can go through the Rainforest network. Somebody from corporate America that's done a lot of contracting. They can just advise you, not as an attorney. What are all the kind of tricks, if you will, the big companies play in these agreements? They're really looking to likely gain exclusivity, get some sort of leg up. If you're a technology they might want to acquire, they're going to try to lock you up in some way, shape, or form. There's all kinds of things that's totally appropriate from their standpoint, right? They're partnering with you for a reason, but you may not really understand all those reasons. And so it could be just very, very complex negotiations, and it will take 5 times longer than you think it will. So that's the kind of the generalized advice. Lisa, do you do any coaching on corporate contracts and partnering?
We do a little bit. It's not something we can provide any legal advice on, but we can certainly review things and give our general feedback.
Yeah, so I didn't want to have everybody start contacting. So I'd say start with Rainforest Innovations for sure. And then, you should, and this is a big enough network here in the Albuquerque area, you should be able to find good corporate kind of business development people that did the contracting with small companies and just walk you through what they're doing behind the scenes. So you got to educate yourself on this. Unfortunately, with everything else doing a small company, just add one more complex thing to the mix.
We do have some really great attorneys here, though, that we can refer people to as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was confident of that for sure. Any other questions?
There's nothing that's popped up, so
Okay.
I don't think so.
Since you acknowledge that the lack of marketing expertise is a big problem for many industries, and the products are building, new products that you can't go to look for a marketing firm that's marketing this product. This is a new product. So do you have any thoughts on how you find a good marketing, good marketing expertise on the outside?
Well, there are, I'm sure, I just don't know the firms here, but there are multitude, I'd say, of smaller marketing firms that will work on small projects with startup companies. Because they're gonna bet, hey, if I help you out now and discount my rates, they'll probably work with you in the future. So the basics, a proper website. That's pretty easy to do. Social campaigns, pretty easy to do. So trade shows, I mean, those are all the normal things that younger companies do. The reality is it takes some time to do it, and typically it's better, in my mind, to outsource that early on until you're capable of having a marketing function. But that's what I mean by marketing. So you got to do more than you're doing. And so usually it's digital. That's the easiest. Just create a presence. So companies we work with in our incubator, we give them a challenge to put a minimum of 2 press releases out a month for the first year. Because why? Because I'm an investor. I'm sitting in a meeting. You might think I'm taking notes, but I'm probably searching something on Google. You said something. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna look that up, right? So what's the first thing I'm gonna do? I'm gonna Google your company. Like, what comes up? I mean, that can be just a lot of mundane things. We won a small grant. We appointed an advisor. We made a hire. Whatever. But just creating some sort of digital trail, back, and then the real marketing once you're ready. But it's just like it's just tough because there's so many things to do in the day that all compete from a time perspective. And, most technical founders push marketing absolutely to the back burner. So you got to just figure out how to get some help there. A lot of companies we work with hire students, undergrads that are in the marketing program, maybe juniors have a little bit of expertise. These are great folks they really understand digital, by the way. So they can help you just create an electronic presence, get your LinkedIn set up, post for you. A lot of the students will interview the CEO founders and just do a little story and push it out on LinkedIn, wherever they're going. Finding relevant trade associations and groups, this is not your interns, but hitting trade shows. Now we're back doing that. It's a really, really important part of visibility. Yeah, it's just time and money, like everything else in a startup, right? All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Appreciate you being here, and hopefully this was helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.